Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Saturday afternoon. As per usual, it's the UniAdmissions webinar. I hope all of you are all right, enjoying the summer holidays so far. How are you finding it, Will? How are you enjoying the summer holidays, which, now I think about it, don't exist if you're an adult?
I mean, I don't know if you saw the news, Matt, but I've had COVID this last week. So last week hasn't been fantastic for me, but that's last week aside, it's been great.
Ugh, not nice. I had my second jab this morning, feeling fine. So hopefully I will avoid your fate. Have
Yeah,
you had your second jab yet, Will?
I've only had number one, and I only had it about 10 days before I ended up getting it, which is a bit of a shame. But
Big mistake. Should have got there faster.
yeah, I think so. Oh well.
I think we may as well introduce ourselves. For those of you who have been to one of these before, which hopefully isn't too many of you, because we've done loads now, and I hope that people don't come every week. I don't have a running total, but obviously we do need to mark the 100th whenever that comes up. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Matt. I look after our research here at UniAdmissions. So all of the ideas and suggestions, strategies and approaches we're going to be talking about in the presentation today, all of these are what me and my team work on, making sure that everything that we suggest is backed up by data. And so that whatever we're bringing to you is stuff that we have tested and know works. And Will, what do you do? What do you do?
My name is Will. Aside from lying in bed all week, I am the head of consulting. So basically, when students get in touch with us, it's down to me and my team to speak with them, work out what's going on with them and their application, and then from there, give the best advice we can, make the best recommendations we can as well. It's always, every single student comes to us, there's always a multifactorial consideration. It's never, people often have questions which they think have easy answers, but there are never easy answers. There's always lots and lots of things to take into consideration. And ultimately, this is a young student's future. So we really want to make sure that we're getting everything right when we do it.
Oh, thanks, Will. I'm glad we're trying to get things right as well.
Yeah, it's a good thing to aim for, isn't it?
Today we're going to be talking a little bit, since it's the summer, stretching a little bit further away from the topics of getting in, over onto a discussion of the kinds of opportunities outside of studying there are once you find yourself at Oxford or Cambridge. This is to kind of give you a taste of the breadth of things available, but also just to sort of mix it up a little bit, because it says to reassure people that it is still good fun once you get there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of certainly among certain students, there's a worry that they're going to go and have a rubbish time. And what we don't want to do is young, talented students that could do really well there be dissuaded just because they don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, that's spot on. And it also gives us a chance to reminisce a little about our own experiences, which is always nice.
Always nice.
And next week, I believe possibly yourself, Will, again, and Dylan, are going to be looking through some of the numbers around grade averages, around test scores, around things like that, to really put some data behind the application process for those students who are perhaps a little bit more worried, or students who are feeling confident, but perhaps don't want to be overconfident.
Yeah. I think particularly if you're in that gray area where your grades are kind of good, but you're not quite sure, it's probably a good one for you to come to, because it will clear things up.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking today about how Oxbridge is different in terms of the opportunities available to you. I've split these up into sort of 6 arbitrary categories based on the things that I remember people being interested in when I was at Cambridge, which that ranges from music and drama to debating, all the way over to sport and student government, and of course that last thing you want to be worrying about as you're heading out of university, which is internships and moving towards proper steady employment. So I think the first thing to think here is that studying at Oxbridge is not just the degree. There's more to it than that. The facilities that are there, in addition to, you know, the libraries and the lecture halls and all those sorts of things, are really enormous. And they do exist at Oxbridge on another level to any other university. You know, every university will have the opportunity for you to row, but not every university will have the opportunity for you to row in the boat race. You can play rugby at every university, but you can only play, is it Twickenham or is it Twickenham Stoop these days?
No, it's Twickenham. What's Twickenham Stoop? I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's like a mini Twickenham across the road.
Okay, no, they still play at.
There you go. You can play, you know, you can play rugby at Twickenham. I don't think you get to play cricket at Lord's, but I don't think it's a million miles off. Maybe the Oval.
No, I think the rugby varsity game is quite is I think a much bigger deal than the cricket one is.
We say the kind of facilities, the opportunities are just on another level at Oxford and Cambridge, and that's one of the things that makes studying there so exciting, that you can not just go for the study, but also go and enjoy a whole range of other things alongside that. It's not just about the things that you sort of learn in the libraries or in the laboratories. So as I said, we've sort of broken this down into a handful of headers. So to talk, there we go. First, about the opportunities in music and drama and sports. So this is one of the several, 3, 4 orchestras at Cambridge. So there are students, you know, obviously there are students who study music who are very engaged with organizations like this. But if you're interested, if you're a keen pianist, a keen violinist, obviously, you know, as the stereotype goes, there's a fair number of people with a grade 8 in this, that, or the other that decide to go to Oxbridge. The opportunities to go and play with these groups are fantastic, and they also have their own library of instruments available as well. So you can, I mean, I don't think they're going to quite let you have a go on a Stradivarius, but it's, again, not too far off. There's instrument hire available. There is support from the college. I believe, at least at my college, everyone who was studying music got a piano in their room. Things like that are, you know, a little bit of a step beyond in terms of the music that's available. And it's not just classical music. I don't know if you had any encounters with the dreadful a cappella groups, Will.
Haven't I told you? I auditioned.
Oh, no. Oh, so yeah. Will likes the dreadful a cappella groups.
Yeah, so the year before I started university, I went to see them at the Fringe, and I thought, wow, this is good. And I auditioned, and they've got, like, you know, many rounds of interviews. I got quite far, but sadly fell at the last hurdle, which I was pretty upset about at the time.
God, well, there you have it.
Yeah.
I'm sort of disappointed in you, Will, if I'm honest. As I think I've said, there are all of these student ensembles and orchestras available. Every college is going to have, at the very least, a choir. They'll probably have a concert space in addition to what they have in the chapel. And many of these will go on tours of Europe and the States. And obviously it's a route into music, whether that's, you know, as a performer, whether it's as a someone in the broader industry. But certainly the choir tours was something that always mystified me. But our college choir was always disappearing off to New York or Boston. Yeah. Even though I had previously believed that the market for religious choral music was relatively small, it seems that there's definitely something to be done with it.
Well, I think, yeah, they're just generally, you know, the college and the university name carries a lot of clout. So if you're involved in it, you'll find that actually you're able to go to pretty impressive performances and things like that. Yeah.
The same goes for drama. I mean, this is particularly notable at Cambridge. Every college is going to have a theatre, probably doubling up as the concert space. There'll be a bunch of theatre and drama societies. You know, there may be a Shakespeare society and a comedy society and a musical theatre. There'll be no shortage of stuff to get involved with. And you've got the opportunity to be involved in Footlights as well, which is a very famous student comedy society from Cambridge that has given us Stephen Fry and Mitchell and Webb, all sorts of famous people. Pretty much half the celebrated British actors that you see have come through Cambridge, and a couple from Oxford. Obviously, Oxford isn't as good.
We're too busy. We don't have time for this nonsense acting. We're singing a cappella, more important stuff.
And the last one of these, I think you can speak more to this, Will, because I did not have anything to do with debate. But yeah, tell us about debate.
Actually, it's sort of, we were saying that acting sort of varies a little bit from Oxford to Cambridge, and there's still quite a big scene in Oxford, but your opportunity, if you're interested in sort of union and debating, is pretty good at either one. Naturally, both Oxford and Cambridge have their own unions, and they both have a pretty impressive roster of speakers that come in each year, each term, not only to give talks, but also to do debates. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and you get involved from an early stage, you can be debating across from some pretty high caliber figures. And ultimately, what's quite good about the union is you can really get involved as little or as much as you want. So you could put lots of your time into it, work your way up the ranks of your slate, end up as treasurer, librarian, president, and really spend a lot of time there. Or you could just be sort of a low-level member. You could go to talks that are interesting, you use their pool tables, that kind of thing, get cheap drinks at the bar. It really is, you get out what you put in, and you can put in as much as you want. But if you want to put in a lot, you will get a lot back out of it. It's not a secret that a lot of politicians and sort of high-flying, particularly Conservative Party members, have been members of, either the Oxford or the Cambridge Union. And so it's naturally a bit of a dry run for people if they want to go into politics further down the line. And ultimately, it's, I would say relatively accessible. You do have to pay, I think you have to pay sort of £150, £200 to become a member. But then you're effectively a member for life. And given the number of talks that they put on, you can very easily get that value back within a year or two. So I definitely, if you are wondering, should I become a union member or not, I would recommend it. It will be worth it. And of course, you can be involved in some really, really interesting and very heated, usually, debates, which is particularly for PPE, is something which they're very, very keen on.
Thanks, Will. On the point of the Prime Ministers, I looked into this the other day because I thought to myself, 5, that's a lot. And then I looked at the list of people who would nearly become Prime Minister but have been officers of the Oxford Union. And that adds on to your 5, you get Michael Foot, Jeremy Thorpe, William Hague, Michael Heseltine, Michael Gove, Dennis Healy, and Roy Jenkins, who were all one election short of becoming Prime Minister.
There we go. That's the way up.
Absolutely, which does put out the terrifying thought that several British elections have been fought between people who had previously fought each other to be in charge of the Oxford Union.
Yeah, they'd practiced, they'd tried it all out 20 years ago, and they knew exactly how it was going to go.
So that brings us on to rowing. Will, you also know about rowing, because I'm let's face it, not sport.
I know a bit about rowing. Yeah, it's worth saying at this point. Obviously, we've covered a few topics already. It might be that you're sat there with a couple questions about it. If you do have questions, do whack them in the Q&A. What we normally do is Matt and I will run through the presentation and sort of talk about everything we want to talk about, and then we take some time to go back through all your questions. However, if you do ask a question, make sure we can understand it in about sort of 40 minutes time, because sometimes people put very little context, and obviously it makes sense at the time, but once we've moved on, it makes less sense. But yeah, please do ask away. In terms of rowing, it is something which most people will get involved with at some point. Lots of people will, in freshers, be very excited about the idea of it and get involved right away. Some people might not until their sort of second or third years, and then start getting a bit more interested. Ultimately, it's a really good place for it. If you are interested, both Oxford and Cambridge have lovely rivers and very big rowing scene. And, you can actually sort of get a lot of experience quite early on, because they fit in quite a lot of training for you. Naturally, you've got I suppose the university level, but also the college level. And actually, the colleges will put out as many boats as they have people who want to row. So if you're third boat isn't very good, it doesn't really matter. They'll still be more than happy for you to row, because really it's a, you know, it's a bit of a lottery rowing. You just want as many people to get started from the start, and then you see who ends up doing well. And also what's quite good is, obviously, if you want to get involved in football, for example, at the university level, and you've not played football before, you're going to be involved with lots of other people who've been playing football for, you know, 15 years already, something ridiculous like that. And a lot of the people who row will have rowed before, but actually a lot of them won't. So it's quite a good leveler in terms of the playing field, and particularly at the college level, you know, a lot of those people won't have done any rowing before. So you will be surrounded by people who are in a similar circumstance to you. And of course, as Matt said earlier, you get to row in the boat race. But also, you know, even if you're not too bothered about you yourself putting in all the efforts of doing the rowing, definitely make the most of the regattas and the sort of competitions that happen, because it's really good viewing. It's a lovely atmosphere to be there on a, you know, the middle of Trinity term, and you've got the summer's eights going on, and there are people barbecuing and people selling pims, that kind of thing. It's a great atmosphere to be around. So if you don't want to slave over the boat, which I completely understand, you can still enjoy the fact that there's rowing going on at Oxford and Cambridge.
Absolutely. As Will mentions, it's one of those things that's available from the very serious professional, you know, semi-professional level at the top, all the way down to the much sillier amateur level. Yeah. I can't remember if you do bumps at Oxford or not, but at Cambridge, the principal form of boat racing is where the boats chase each other up the river.
So you do in the winter, they do bumps, yeah,
and try and chase each other up the river and try and bash into each other's boats, which is much more fun than the boat race itself, if you ask me. For us, that means everyone's in someone else's wash, so the advantage of overtaking disappears. As we've mentioned, there are opportunities at every college alongside rowing. There are sports teams in pretty much everything. Yeah. You know, you can go and get a blue in Tiddlywinks, I think was available when I was there.
Tiddlywinks is not available anymore. What is that? You could get a blue in?
Yeah. I think maybe it was a half blue, but
I hope so. Honestly, they're giving them away at Cambridge.
But one of the nice things is, because there's so much in the way of facilities, so much in the way of enthusiastic people, even if you've never had a go at the sport in question beforehand, you know, whether that's squash or rowing or whatever, there are going to be people who are keen to get you keen for you to participate, and the level of sort of effort that you're going to have to put in is sort of entirely up to you. I know at most colleges they will try and get everyone into a boat at least once during their first year, whether they want to go or not. And so particularly for rowing, there's no, I see Siva has asked about this, there really is no expectation that you be particularly good or particularly tall. And if you are tiny, you can always cox, as every boat needs one very small person to steer while the big chaps do all the hard work.
Yeah, it's worth saying, you know, on a weekend, there will be lots and lots and lots of college games going on. And the majority of those college games, your team will probably be short a player or two. And, you know, what ends up happening is you just have to muck along and hope that the other team don't absolutely trash you. But what it means is, if you do want to get involved in pretty much anything, you will be welcomed with open arms, because they will appreciate you being there regardless of how good you are. Then if you go again the next week, you'll be a little better. And by the end of it, you know, you'll be a man of the match for the college team, and you'll be, you know, doing a really good job. So do just throw yourself out there. People will want you there. I had one of my friends was the college hockey captain, and invariably I was asked pretty much every weekend to play because there's no one there. And I'd never played before, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
Your poor back.
Well, I mean, the back actually, because the back went from the rowing, not the hockey. The hockey was fine.
I always worry about that when I watch people playing hockey. It just looks so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think they need to extend their sticks by another couple of feet so they can do it completely upright.
That's very much my feeling, but I've written into the International Hockey Board, and they've not signed up for my innovations. So that brings us on to the question of student government. I think this is one I was more involved with than you were, Will.
Yeah.
So every college has essentially its own miniature students' union. So there may only be 300-400 students at your college, and that you will have your own student union, often referred to as the common room. So you'll have the junior common room for the undergrads and the senior common room for the graduate students. And there's all sorts of opportunities there. There will be 10, 15 different jobs for you to try and get in on in the student union, whether that's being the treasurer, whether that's being the women's officer, whether that's being the sport person, whether that's one of the people who organizes the food. Indeed, the most important job, that's what I was in charge of while I was at Cambridge. I was in charge of food. And that gives you the opportunity to, be in conversations with the college themselves, make sure that things are being done right. When I was at Cambridge, there was a big campaign to improve the wages of the wait staff and the kitchen staff at the college, which we were successful in doing, which was really nice. And so there are things like that you can get involved in, and because the colleges are so small, you can have an impact that's much larger than you would be able to have at a UCL or Edinburgh or Warwick, where there are thousands of students. In these smaller environments where you can sort of build personal relationships with the college leadership, you can get all sorts of interesting things done. And there's university-wide government as well, so you can go and try and become part of the Cambridge-wide student government, and every student society is going to have the chance for you to be something, whether you're the treasurer of the hockey club, whether you're the social secretary of the rowing club. There's going to be an opportunity there to be a leadership person in something. And these are really helpful roles to have on your CV when you're looking at internships, looking at first jobs, to show that you've been able to do something outside of your studies that shows that you can do more than just learn, but that you can also communicate well with others, that you can also provide leadership, that you can also do a range of things. And this leads into internships. Many student societies are linked up with top graduate employers. If you are a big investment bank, a big consulting company, the civil service, whether you're a Google, a Facebook, any of these large companies, they want to hire the best students. And one of the ways they do this is they show up early and have a look at the students, whether it's in first or second or third year, linking up with student societies, trying to figure out who they want to take on for internships, helping you apply for the top grad schemes, and just to get to know these people and be exposed to what kind of work you want to do after university early on. And there was less of this when I was at graduate school, but I think, Will, you probably had more of an experience of this than I did.
So for those of you who are very career driven, which a lot of the students that I speak with are, actually you can start going to careers fairs sort of basically about a month or two in. So you can really hit the ground running. Now, a lot of people, or some people that I knew, spent maybe a bit too much time on the internships and sort of neglected the degree a little bit. And obviously there's a balance to strike, but actually you can do a lot of career driven stuff when you're at university. And generally speaking, when people do summer internships with companies which they've set up through going to careers fairs whilst they've been at the university, then they end up being successful on the graduate sort of programs as well. So people are generally going to be much more keen on hiring you if you've already worked for them for 2 months and you're really good, in comparison to someone who they've interviewed and the interview is good, but they actually haven't seen you work. So certainly you can be starting to lay some foundations in your first year, if not definitely in your second year, and then that really sets you up for graduating and moving into sort of a corporate profession, if that's what you want to be doing. Equally, if you are interested in, doing research or whatever it is, there's loads of stuff going on there, and you can get research, and often you can get help from college with funding that as well. So it's all about just getting involved, throwing yourself out there, making the most of the opportunities that you have.
Fab, thanks, Will. Well, I say, obviously, one of the points of going to university is to go and get that degree, but you don't want to be too distracted. And I don't know when we're next discussing work experience, but if it's not for a few weeks, it's an important point to drop in here. as this is something that I like to really emphasize in all the presentations we do. If you think you might like to become a doctor, you should try it out before you start studying medicine. You think you might like to be a lawyer, you should try it out before you start studying law. Lots of people are put under pressure by their parents to study a particular degree, to go into a particular industry, and they discover quite early on that they don't like it. Not just by parents, but social pressures, their own expectations. The easiest way to find out if you want to be a doctor or not is to go and do 2 or 3 weeks work experience, not necessarily with a doctor, maybe in a care home, maybe in a mental health institution, in any kind of medical setting. If you're not sure if you want to be a lawyer, go and spend some time volunteering with a law firm, go and get work experience. All of these things are really important to figuring out what you want to do with your career, because the last thing you want to do is to spend 3 or 4 years studying law only to discover that you don't actually like being a lawyer. And certainly my experience is, if a job isn't for you, you can tell pretty quickly. But if a subject isn't for you, that tends to be a lot more complicated. So
I've spoken with students who have said, I went on a 2-week internship and I didn't really like it, so that was a bit of a waste of time. And I said, no, that was a very good use of your time, because that could have saved you a lot of time further down the line if you hadn't done it, and then you sort of just sleepwalked into it. But yeah, Matt is absolutely right in what he's saying about getting that kind of experience in advance.
Absolutely. As I like to say, the best time to get divorced is before you get married. The best time to stop being a doctor is before you become a doctor. So that brings us on to the sort of last question. This is a little bit of a shorter presentation than usual today, which is one that's already been raised by Samantha and I think a couple of others, which is to say, how much does this matter in terms of my application? So rather than me and Will tell you, I have a video clip here from Dr. Philip Knox. This is taken from last year's Cambridge Open Day. He is the admissions tutor for English at one of the admissions tutors for English at Cambridge. But this advice very much goes for every subject, and hopefully the video will work.
So I suppose if you are extremely interested and excited by things that are not related to the subject of English, like sport or music or something like that, that's great. But we're probably not that interested actually in that element of your well-rounded self.
Yeah, you like that video, don't you, Matt?
I think it's a very pithy way of putting it across.
Yeah,
which is that unfortunately, extracurriculars don't count in the UK system. Unlike Harvard or Yale or Stanford, there aren't any extra features. You're not going to get in on the basis of your personality, on the basis of your success at the Tokyo Olympics, on the basis of your books, on the basis of your musical ability if you're not applying for music. All that matters is how good you are at the subject that you are applying to do. If you are Simone Biles, that's great, but having Olympic gold is no good if you get 3 Bs. All the things we've been talking about today, these are marvelous opportunities once you've got in, but none of this is part of the application. There's a slight wrinkle here. Obviously, if you've been doing extracurricular work that supports your academic ability, if you want to study English and you've written a Booker Prize winning novel, that will help. But generally speaking, unless you can draw a uncontroversial 1-sentence link between what you've been doing outside of school and how it will support you studying in university, it's not going to help you. And if you send in an application that says, I would very much like to star in many plays at Cambridge, and I guess I'll do physics as well if I have to, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work, I'm afraid. In fact, Will, if I leave you with the pie chart, will you know what to do?
Actually, no, I'm new to this. What's the pie chart, Matt?
Oh, no, we've done like
all right, I've got it.
these.
But yeah, so as Matt was saying, naturally, they actually care about if you're a good candidate for the subject, which is on balance probably the best way to evaluate you, really. Yes, some students can be upset because they've put a lot of effort into their D.A.V. or their piano, but actually, I think everyone would rather that the people who were best for the place got the place rather than those that had spent lots of time doing gymnastics. And obviously, there are a few different things that Oxford and Cambridge are going to be looking at in terms of your application. And this pie chart here basically demonstrates those different parts and their weighting in terms of what actually makes the biggest difference, because not all parts of your application are made equal. So you can see the two biggest chunks are your admissions tests and your interviews. That's sometimes a bit of a surprise to students. They're expecting their grades or their personal statement to make more of an impact. But actually what we found is the tests and the interviews actually do contribute the majority to that decision of whether or not you're going to be getting an offer. And this is for a few reasons. So firstly, the interview and the test is designed by Oxford and Cambridge. So it's designed to test exactly what they want to test. So naturally, they're going to listen to it pretty heavily. But also, we're currently in a period which is a little bit unprecedented for Oxford and Cambridge insofar as the applicants haven't actually sat their GCSEs. So the only standardized test that Oxford has to evaluate their applicants is the admissions test. That's not happened before. And naturally, they're going to rely on it a little even more heavily than they would typically, because it's all they have to rely on in a standardized way. You'll notice the yellow chunk here is everything else. And that more or less comprises of personal statement and school references. And what we do see is actually, we've got some notes from the sort of review feedback of previous students for PPE for certain colleges at Oxford, who actually put the school reference as more important than the personal statement, which again is quite interesting because a lot of students and a lot of schools will spend a lot of time on the personal statement and much less time elsewhere. When actually, if you want to be making the most of the time that you have and you want to be getting an offer, that needs to stop, because actually the personal statement is going to make one of the smallest impacts on your application there is. If you've got an hour spare, you better spend that on the test rather than the personal statement, because you can make more of a difference there. There is one difference between Oxford and Cambridge, and that is, so actually there are a few differences across different subjects. So this is a really, really good rule of thumb. Broadly speaking, if the subject is slightly more STEM related, then the grades and the test might have a bigger impact. If it's slightly more humanities related, then the personal statement might have a slightly larger impact, but not huge. But the main difference between Oxford and Cambridge is Oxford will interview very few candidates, between 20 and 40% across different subjects. Cambridge will interview pretty much everyone, between 70 and 90% across different subjects. So actually, if you apply to Cambridge, you know you've got a very good chance of getting to interview. As if you apply to Oxford, you know you've got a very small chance of getting to interview. And naturally, when they're selecting who to interview or not, they don't have this grey segment to evaluate you based on. So what does that look like? Well, at that point, it's effectively just 50% test, 50% GCSEs, just very simply put. So if you're the kind of person who has perhaps slightly lower GCSEs than you'd like, or you've been giving the test a go and you're not too confident with how well that's been going, it might actually be that an application to Oxford would be a bit ill-advised, as you'll just be rejected pre-interview. Whereas at least with Cambridge, you'd get to interview and you'd have the opportunity to demonstrate, your strength as a candidate. So there are a few bits and pieces to be thinking of and to be wary of around this, but actually, like I said, this is a very good heuristic for what am I going to be measured on? And also then for students who are doing this on their own to be thinking, right, how should I be spending my time? You should be spending your time along this distribution. Naturally, you've got your GCSEs. You should be pretty much getting your predicted grades, if you haven't already, when you get back to school. So then where should you be spending your time? Well, probably about 45% on the interview, another 45% on the test, and then the rest working on that personal statement. Really important to keep that in mind. What we don't want to do is you spend all your time on your personal statements, then not do as well in the test and be upset that you don't get very far. And that's not necessarily your fault. You just need to know where you need to be spending your time. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of the weighting. People normally have questions, so I'm sure there'll be stuff that we talk about in the Q&A related to that.
Thanks, Will. So that brings us on to sort of the discussion of the different things that at UniAdmissions we pride ourselves on being able to do to help with people's applications.
Yeah.
These fall into 4 broad categories. I'm going to do 2, and then Will will do 2.
Okay.
So that's the one-to-one support that we offer through tuition, the resources that we've developed. A big sort of hidden part of the company is the resource team. The enrichment seminars that we run every Sunday. So there's one tomorrow, and the day courses that we'll be running in the. Well, they're coming up soon, aren't they? I'm looking forward to that.
We've had a couple of the earlier ones. So there's been some courses for choosing colleges, for example.
Oh, okay. So that's coming up fast then.
Yeah.
So yeah, Will, talk to us a little bit about the one-to-one tuition.
Okay, yeah, sure. So naturally, we've said Oxbridge is great, fantastic, really good to go there. These are the things that are going to be, you sort of determine whether or not you get there. And basically, this is what we do to help students with that. Tuition is a really key part. Naturally, we're not going to be holding students' hands. They need to be very self-driven, very self-motivated. But having a tutor there who's been through this process, who's done it successfully and helped others through it as well, makes an enormous difference. It means they can help you focus on the things you should be focusing on. It means they can help you work through problem areas when you come up against them, because there will be problem areas. And ultimately, it means that you can achieve and perform the best that you can manage. It would be almost impossible to do your A-levels without a teacher helping you. And these parts of the application process are just as important. So having someone there to guide you is really, really key. Naturally, you've got lots of other stuff to be getting on with school. And that's why we need to make sure that these tutorials are flexible. But yeah, you have someone there to guide you. They'll be sending you work to be doing outside of those tutorials as well. So you get an extra set of homework if you're ever one of our students. And I do think we have a report from one of our former tutorial. Basically, this is there so that students can effectively keep track of what they're up to. And also keep track of what their homework is and what kind of things they've been meant to be working away on. Matt, can you click onto the next?
Yes, of course. So one of the things that we've found is that it's not just useful for students to have a kind of a recap of what they've been doing, where they're doing well, where they need to improve, but also that it's of great help to teachers, to parents, to know what their son or daughter has been up to, and to be kept abreast of it. So whether you're the parent or the student, this is something you get after each session, and make sure that you are well apprised of what your child is up to, and so that you can kind of help with that and continue to engage them. I know from my own contact with teenagers that it can be difficult getting this level of detail out of them. So the reports really do help there. But speaking of things that are written down, this is a question we've had from Siva as well, about resources. So we have an in-house publishing division run by my colleague Toby, which develops a sort of textbooks that are hours and hours alone. I believe there are a best part of 100 of them now.
Yeah.
They include questions for every admissions test, hundreds and hundreds of questions, as well as access to our preparation portal, which gives you the chance to practice for these tests alongside the information you need to answer the questions, and helps you to practice in the exam conditions, particularly useful for computer-based tests like the UCAT. The books, just to emphasize it, we I'm trying to think when it was. Roughly a year ago, I had the great burden of proofreading our BMAT book, which is 600 pages A4, size 10 type, and weighs nearly 2 kilograms. You do get a lot of questions in our books, and the students who read them, who answer the questions, they tend to do pretty damn well in the tests. What, right, Will?
Yeah, I mean, so you know, ultimately having a tutor isn't a substitute for practice. You know, we expect our students to work very, very hard, and you know, the result of that is that they get their offers. But part of working hard means doing lots and lots of practice questions, making sure that you know exactly what you're doing and you are very well versed with these tests. The tests are vital. We'll probably talk about that a bit next week. So, you know, more time spent on the test equals more offers received at the end of the day, and that's what our students want.
Yeah. So that brings us on to, I don't know, Will, do you want to try out the video of the prep portal? Should we go for that?
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. So here we have a little video clip of how the prep portal works. I'll leave this to Will to narrate because it's very fun. And so this is fun every week.
Yeah. So.
Oh no! Oh no!
What's happened?
Let me try again. Too fast.
Yeah. So as Matt was saying, we've actually got loads of different materials and resources. Because it's actually quite helpful to learn in different ways. But the prep portal is a really effective way. Basically, it's broken down into a few different parts. I think it might have paused, Matt.
It has.
We're going. But yeah, so naturally students have books where they're working through things. They've got this as well, where they're learning sort of core content of their test, but also doing practice questions. Matt's right, particularly for computer-based tests, it's really helpful to actually be able to practice on a computer. So what we do is we design our own sets of questions, block them into sets of 15 so that students can sort of work through them and practice on particular areas of tests. See how they're doing, see how they're improving, that kind of thing, and even see how long it's taking them as well, so that they can work on their timing, which is an area which lots of students struggle with. And then once you're feeling pretty confident, it's time to do a full practice paper and actually work through the whole thing. It's one thing to be able to do 15 questions in a set amount of time. It's another thing to be able to do a test for an hour and a half, 2 hours on the trot, and making sure that you've got that mental stamina is really, really important. Particularly for these tests with lots of reading, you know, something like the LNAT, you're reading loads and loads of information. What you don't want to do is sort of start dropping off as you're halfway through the test. You need to stay just as with it all the way through. And yeah, ultimately, we want to make sure that our students have all the materials they need. So we make a hell of a lot and they end up working really hard. Let's talk about seminars.
Yes, thanks, Will.
No problem.
We also, in addition to the prep portal and the books and the one-to-one, we do like the students to spend a little bit of time with one another, which is where the enrichment seminars come in. These take place every Sunday, and these are a chance for our students to engage with university level topics in discussion with current students and recent graduates, and to really practice the kind of skills they're going to need for the interview. Will, you've been along to a couple of these recently. What have you seen that you found interesting?
So naturally, what I find interesting is skewed by my own areas that sort of entertain me. So there are 5 subject streams for these: medicine, STEM, humanities, economics, and law. And to be honest, if ever I'm watching them, it's always going to be STEM or economics. But there's quite a few interesting economics ones recently, you know, about topics that I'd never heard of before, but I think some of the economics students luckily had. And the STEM ones, there's quite a lot on AI and consciousness, which naturally I'm a bit more interested in. And so those are particular ones that I've enjoyed. But yeah, ultimately, there's a different topic each week. They're designed to be difficult. They're designed to push students above and beyond what they're used to, and designed to throw them into new topics so that by the end of the year, you developed a huge range of sort of broad understanding of different topics within your field. You've also found a few new areas that you're very interested in. You've probably done further reading on that with your tutor. And you've also been in a scenario where you're discussing advanced topics with colleagues, and naturally that kind of sets you up quite well for the interview, because ultimately the interview is effectively a mock tutorial, and these are designed in that to be of a similar way. So if you're able to do well in these seminars and contribute and discuss things, the interview should basically just feel pretty normal to you, and that's what we want at the end of the day. We don't want it to be this big, stressful, worrisome thing. We want it to be, it's another seminar. I'm going to go learn some stuff, discuss some stuff, ask some questions, answer some questions, and it'll be good. So that's the idea behind them. And yeah, generally students enjoy it quite a lot, very interactive, and yeah, very, very broad. So you can find some things that you enjoy in particular.
And the last thing to talk about is our day courses. These are one of my favorite parts of what we provide. These take place, I believe this year the plan is for them to be online because of that bloody virus.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, because doing them in person is my favorite part of the year. Getting a chance to spend time with all of the students we've been working with, put real human moving faces to names, and also to really see the difference it makes to have people in the same room together, really interacting, focusing on the things they're interested in, and having that kind of intense preparation in the run-up to the test or the personal statement or the interview, to really see the level of focus and enthusiasm and passion on the part of the students that we work with. It's good on Zoom, but it's not as good for me, but I'm sure it's as good for the students, right, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think the day courses, because they're just one intensive period, doing it in person is fine, because the seminars run every week. I think fitting that in with student schedules and having having travel involved as well would make things quite complicated. So it's a good I think it's a good compromise to have the intensive courses in person and the seminars online. But I and a couple other members of the team have got COVID this week, and so it's still very much around, and just running them in person is bound to end up with problems and cancellations and things like that. So we're better off not tempting fate.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. The good news is that all of this does pay off. In the last year that we have complete data for, our students were successful at more than 3 times the rate of the average. The rate of the average. Ugh.
Nice.
And that's something we're really proud of, even compared with some of the top schools in the UK, the Etons, the Peter Simmons, the Westminsters, the St Paul's. Our results are better than theirs. Although, I haven't been into the office for a couple of weeks, and I guess you haven't been with the virus, Will. But our offices aren't as nice as those at Eton College. So
getting there.
It depends what you like, but certainly when it comes to getting into Oxbridge, we do a little better than them. Slightly worse on the architectural side.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think that brings us to the end of the discussion, more or less. We'll move on to questions.
We have a few more things to talk about. Foundation, podcast.
I'm getting to those.
Okay, cool.
There we go. So I want to say, if any of you really enjoyed this webinar, please do mention it on Trustpilot, how much you've enjoyed it. You can go there to read reviews from people we have worked with in the past. I would encourage you to go to Trustpilot directly rather than looking at this slide, because we want you, because not only because it's very small, but because we want you to see the full range of responses we've had, rather than just picking out a couple of our favorites and pretending that's all there is to it. We also have our foundation. So if you've been at all worried in the context of anything we've talked about today about being able to afford to come and work with us, we want to reassure you that if you're worried about that, then so are we. We worked with nearly 100 students last year through our foundation. So that's students who came to us on a reduced fee basis, all the way down to, if not free, then maybe a £5.
I actually think the 93 all were for free.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
And well, that's ruined our safe for work tag. Oh well. We are targeting 250 students this year. and to be at a point where fully half of the students we work with are on a subsidised basis in 2022. Do you know how things are going towards that 250 so far, Will?
So I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure we've got, plenty of space for more students. I think with the problem is we don't have a huge number of applicants. So, if you or someone that you think might be eligible, have a look on the website. We've got some sort of criteria put up there, or give us a call if you're really unsure. But yeah, please do apply.
There you go. So that brings us to the end of our slide. Unfortunately, I haven't put the podcast slide in this week. I'm sorry, Will.
Yeah.
Please do listen to Will's podcast.
Yeah, Will and Rohan's podcast. We haven't made an episode in a while, actually, so it's fine if people don't go for this week, and then next week we'll make some more, and there'll be more for you to listen to.
You'll have to do a new one. We're now going to take some questions. We've already had 15.
Yeah.
We will try to answer as many as we can. But just to say that it's entirely possible that the questions that you have for us will be too specific, too personal, too detailed, and that in that instance, it is much more effective for us to speak to you directly, so that we can understand you better, understand your question better, and understand the right components of an answer for you. So I'm going to do my very best to answer all the questions that we can. But if the question is very specifically about you, about your circumstances, if it's going to require extra research, then I really encourage you to follow the example of the animation and get in touch with us through booking a consultation, because that will give us 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to speak to you directly, figure out what it is that you need, and really calibrate our answers to your personal circumstances in a way that is, while possible, somewhat impractical in the webinar format. Will, off you go.
I've picked out a few. So we've had a few good questions from someone called Michelle. So I just wanted to run through them. One question is about, sort of, is there the opportunity to sort of be in quiet, less hectic, less busy places at Oxford or Cambridge, or is it all sort of super hectic? The answer is yeah, absolutely. So, there are lots and lots of places for you to sort of relax, be calm, and not be overwhelmed by sort of lots of, noise and jubilation. And, naturally this varies from college to college, but most colleges will have, large, quiet green spaces. Mine had enormous meadows. You have your library. They usually also have like quiet rooms as well, specifically for people who just need a bit of a break. So there's plenty on that front for people who are a bit quieter and don't want as much noise as maybe other people want. You've also asked which university has more of an alcohol drinking atmosphere. Ultimately, I would say pretty much all universities have a relatively strong drinking culture, though I'd say Oxford and Cambridge, or at least from my experience, Oxford puts a lot more effort into trying to provide stuff for non-drinkers, basically. So when you're in your first week, the ENTS reps, ENTS short for entertainment, put a lot of effort into organizing like club events and pub crawls and things like that. But pretty much every evening they have a sort of parallel non-drinking event going on, whether it's like ice skating or a movie night or whatever it is. So they do actually put a lot of effort into things like that. I'd argue a lot more than other universities do. Matt, was it sort of similar where you were?
Yeah, I think as well, it's worth considering that compared with when I was at university nearly 15 years ago, the impression I get from speaking to young people is that the culture of alcohol is much less strong than it was then. That there's a lot more in the way of opportunities for non-drinking activities. But that, yeah, that the universities are much more conscious about this than perhaps they were in the past. So I wouldn't let it put you off applying. Like my sense is there will be plenty of other non-drinkers and activities targeted towards them at every point. And at the very least, you'll have the opportunity to get up early, not have hangovers, and the money you'll save as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for it.
And it's worth it. Obviously, people don't drink for lots of different reasons. but sort of whatever your reason is, there's probably a ton of other people who have the same reason. And there's probably sort of, you know, some kind of society. There are so many societies at Oxford and Cambridge, arguably way too many. There is going to be, whatever you're interested in, whatever it is you like doing, there will be other people who are the same. And there's probably someone a few years ago who set up a society around it. So I think you asked if there's a Doctor Who society. There is, yeah. There's something for pretty much everything. It's kind of nuts. So in your first week, probably about 3 or 4 days in, you'll go around the Freshers' Fair, and it's just room after room after room of societies. And so there's lots of sports ones, but there's one for pretty much every, there's a society for pretty much every country, or maybe they do it by language. And then there's loads of sort of cultural societies as well. That there's so much going on, and definitely there'll be something for you to get involved with.
Yeah. There are a couple of other questions. We've had a question about the importance of work experience for medicine. This is probably something we'll tackle in more detail in one of our upcoming medicine discussions. Next one of which is scheduled for the end of this month, so the 28th. And yeah, it's ideal if you can get work experience in medicine, but obviously the universities are aware that this has been very difficult because of the famous virus. And so I wouldn't worry too much about it this year. I think people are going to be very understanding. You may not have had the chance to get to it. But if you still have the chance to do something like volunteering at a local vaccine clinic, really doing anything that you can at all, however small, that's in the broad space of medicine, that's going to be really valuable. Even if all you're doing is standing in a yellow jacket outside a clinic, pointing people to where to get their injections, that's definitely worth something in terms of your application even now.
Yeah.
I say that because I met 5 people in yellow jacket this morning when I went to get my vaccine. And I would recommend that as a piece of work experience, even something as simple as that. You know, it doesn't need to be you doing open heart surgery. It can be as simple as having, you know, been part of a big public health effort, even in only a small way.
Are you saying they've taken off the has already performed open heart surgery requirement nowadays, Matt?
Yeah. Now they are recommending that only people who know what they're doing perform open heart surgery, rather than curious students.
Wow, so relaxed.
Yeah. Related to this is Amy's question about grade inflation. So the thing to bear in mind is that everyone's grades have been a bit all over the place over the past 2 years because of the virus. And so what this tends to mean is that the universities will be worrying less about those GCSE grades, less about those predicted A-level grades, and more about your scores on the admissions test, because in some instances that will be the only proper test that all of the students applying have all done at all. And so I would say, don't worry too much about grade inflation with the GCSEs. Everyone has the same problem there, but do take it as an opportunity to put even more effort into that admissions test, because that is going to be the only proper test they have to make the comparison on the basis of.
There's a couple people asking about how much sort of spare time do you have? How much time do you spend studying? Ultimately, there's no exact number of hours because it really varies from subject to subject, and it really varies from person to person. You know, you will have people who spend every waking moment in the library and people who don't. And ultimately, they might still do just as well at the end of their degree. Different people approach things differently. If you're going for something like medicine, then your degree is going to keep you quite busy, but it's the same everywhere. You know, medics are quite busy, and yet they still find plenty of time to be able to do other stuff. Okay. You will only not do other stuff if you let that happen. You know, there will be spare time, but you've just got to make the most of it and actually sort of be proactive. It can be very easy to have a spare few hours and just sort of watch Netflix and then get to the end of the week and feel like you've not really done anything. But if you'd gone out and, you know, gone to a sports game with that or done something else, then you'll be much happier with yourself. So it's all about being sensible with your time. They aren't going to organize your spare time for you, so you have to be good with that.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of flexibility in what you choose to do, but there are certainly people who, well, you know, choose to do more or less time on their degree, who decide that they would like to have, you know, 40 hours of work and 40 hours of play every week. It really depends on you. I definitely did less studying than I might have done, but I got away with it, which was fine. Sarancha has asked about working while you're at university. There are often small jobs available at your college, invigilating exams, tidying stuff up in the library. But on the whole, colleges are very much against students having jobs while they are studying. If you are worried about money because of your personal circumstances, and so you're thinking of getting a job for that reason, I would speak to the college first, as it is highly likely that they would prefer to give you the money than for you to get a job.
For people who are struggling financially, actually Oxford or Cambridge are probably one of the best places to study, because the funding that they have for students, if they are struggling financially, to help them with accommodation and just general living costs, is really, really good. I did have a job whilst I was at university, even though, as Matt says, it's technically forbidden. But I was working as a research assistant in a sort of a sleep study group, so it was very related to my degree. Not all jobs are related to your degree though, so depending on what subject you're doing, so it might be a bit trickier to find actual sort of a proper employment kind of thing.
Yeah, if you decide that you need to go and work at Sainsbury's alongside your degree, speak to your director of studies, to people at the college first, because chances are if you need that money, then they will have a way of supporting you without you having to do that job. I think we'll take just one or two further questions. If you would like to take the two questions from Samantha, Will, and then I'll pick up another couple from there, and then we'll escape.
Gotcha. So Samantha has asked, well, firstly, one about sort of time to get involved in sports matches. Yes, absolutely. Do Oxbridge offer hockey and badminton? Yes, absolutely. I actually played badminton against the women's Blues sort of team captain and lost pretty significantly. So there's certainly badminton to play, and that's not something I'll be forgetting anytime soon. How to write one personal statement when you're applying for different courses in different universities? This is a bit of a nuanced one. It depends. Might be worth us having a proper chat. But broadly speaking, provided the subjects are close to each other, you just need to be sensible with the way that you're wording things. If you're applying for maths at some universities and art at some other ones, or geography at some other ones, or French language at some other ones, then that's a bit trickier. But if it's PPE at Oxford, economics at LSE, economics at Durham, economics and philosophy at UCL, then that's a little bit easier because they share a lot. But ultimately, it can be done. You just need to be very sensible with the way that you're structuring, phrasing everything.
And the universities will know what's going on. There are certain, if you are applying for PPE at Oxford, there are a set of other courses that you're very likely to be applying for. Will's mentioned it there. You will not be the first person to be in this position. They will have seen this every year for the past 20 years. So universities are very much accustomed to having personal statements that perhaps read a little awkwardly because they've been written for two subjects. If you're in doubt, I would say write it for the subject that is your first choice, and the other universities will be able to cope with that. Don't try and do a half and half if you can avoid it. And I think we'll just take finally the question from Amy about blues, and then Michelle's question about having a chat with us, and then we'll make a move.
I also have one more question I want to answer, but you go ahead.
Well, I'll let you take all of the last ones then. Go ahead, Will.
Well, so I was just going to say, someone had asked when should we start revising for the TSA? And I wanted to say, if you haven't done any practice yet, I'd definitely start. You're going to be starting school in, sadly, just about a month's time, and school's going to keep you pretty busy. Really, you want to start preparing for things like this as early as possible and spread your preparation out. So I studied psychology at Oxford, so spent a lot of time in terms of sort of effective learning, and really practicing as regularly as you can is a much better way to do it than sort of doing 2 weeks of intensive work. That's kind of why we have regular tuition and materials work plus we combine it with an intensive wrap up at the end, rather than just relying on that, because it's not sufficient on its own. So if you haven't done anything, get cracking. And then Matt, I'll leave you to answer the others.
Yes, so a blue is sort of, I suppose you'd call it an award, a distinction that you get at Oxford or Cambridge for representing the university in sport against the other one.
Yeah.
So if you play for Oxford against Cambridge, you get to be a blue. There's a snazzy jacket. It's a sports thing. I wouldn't worry too much about it unless you're really competing at the top of your sport. And
there are, just on the topic of blues, there are also half blues for sports that aren't seen as like mainstream sports. So archery, for example, is a half blue, whereas rugby would be a full blue.
There you go. And finally, Michelle asks about booking a consultation with us. Please do, Michelle. We like to work with students whenever they start. Yeah. We work with students who start when they are 15. We work with students who work with only who start working with us for only a few weeks before the application deadline. We get our best results with those students who spend a year or so with us, but it's not too late to get in touch and for us to see what we can do to support you. We've had a lot of smart questions during this discussion, so I expect that it'll be well worth having a conversation with you to see what we can do to help.
Whenever students come to us at all different times, it's always a matter of giving advice and recommendation that is most suited to them there and then. So if you come to us a year ago, maybe I would recommend something different to what you're coming to us now with, but ultimately whatever I recommend you will be what I know is going to give you the best chance of getting an offer from now, basically, from when we speak. And if we ever feel like actually it's too late, we can't do anything to help a certain student, then we'll say that. We won't take you onto a program if we don't think it's going to get you an offer.
Fab. Well, thank you all for joining me. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you, everyone else.
Likewise.
We will see you next week when we'll be talking through some lovely statistics.
Yeah.
But until then, yeah, enjoy the summer. Goodbye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.